My name is Helen Whitmore. I'm 68 years old. I used to teach English literature at a public high school in Ohio. I retired after my husband passed away, and now I spend most of my days tending to my garden, baking lemon bread for the neighbors, and reminding myself I once mattered to someone. This past Father's Day was revealing. I had spent the entire morning preparing lunch. Roast beef, Brandon's favorite. I used to make it every Sunday when he was a boy, back when he thought I was some kind of magician in an apron. The table was set with cloth napkins and polished silver. I even placed a framed photo of my late husband, Marshall, at the head of the table, just so his presence wouldn't be forgotten. When Brandon and his wife, Emily, arrived, they brought with them the usual noise and a boxed cake from a high-end bakery. Jake, my grandson, gave me a quick hug before diving into his phone. Emily kissed the air near my cheek and immediately asked if the roast had gluten. But the real performance began when Emily handed a velvet gift box to her father. "Happy Father's Day, Dad," she said, her smile radiant for the cameras she wasn't even holding. "From both of us." Robert Callahan, Emily's father, opened the box with the theatrics of a seasoned actor. Inside were 2 thick, gold-edged tickets. 2-week Mediterranean cruise, she beamed. First class, balcony suite, spa included. Robert's eyes twinkled as he leaned over to Brandon. "You didn't have to, son." "Oh, but we wanted to," Brandon replied, placing a hand over his heart like he was auditioning for sainthood. "That cruise package cost $13,000. I know, because the charge would later show up on my bank statement." Then Brandon turned to me. He reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out a wrinkled lottery ticket. No envelope, no box, no smile. "Here you go, Mom," he said, tossing it onto the table like it was a grocery receipt. "If you win, half's mine, okay?" The room erupted in laughter, Emily's sharp and theatrical, Robert's deep and approving. Even Jake chuckled behind his phone. I smiled, but only with my mouth. My hands, resting in my lap, clenched so tight I left crescent-shaped marks in my palms. That lottery ticket cost $2. It was bought with my own money. The same kind of money I once used to pay for Brandon's college tuition. The same kind of money I earned working double shifts after Marshall got sick. The same kind of money I tucked into Brandon's school lunches when he was 10, so he could buy an extra carton of milk and not feel ashamed. I picked up the ticket, smoothed its creases against the linen tablecloth, and said softly, "Thank you." Emily leaned toward Robert. "We just thought he deserved something special, you know? He's done so much for us, helped us buy our house, paid for Jake's private school, even covered the down payment on the new SUV." Robert grinned, waving the cruise tickets in the air like they were a trophy. "This is what a real gift looks like. Thoughtful, meaningful, not chance." That stung more than I cared to admit. No one looked at me. No one saw the way my smile faltered, or how I stared at the ticket like it might transform into something more if I wished hard enough. Brandon took a bite of roast beef and said, "Mom, this is good. You still got it." Still got it. Like an old vacuum cleaner that somehow works after years in the garage. They stayed an hour, maybe less. When they left, there were no hugs, no thanks, just empty plates and half a cake no one touched. I stood at the door and waved as their car backed out of my driveway. Robert rolled down his window and shouted, "Don't forget to check the numbers, Helen. Could be your lucky day." I watched them drive away, the sound of their laughter fading into the distance. The lottery ticket still sat in my hand, warm from where I'd held it too long. $2. 13,000. It wasn't the money. It was what the money represented. What I represented. I turned around, walked back into the kitchen, and set the ticket beside my teacup. I looked at the framed photo of Marshall and I whispered, "You wouldn't believe what just happened." That's how it began. My son gave his father-in-law a $13,000 cruise package and handed me a $2 lottery ticket. I won $120 million. And I taught him a lesson he'll never forget. I stayed at the table long after they'd gone. The roast had gone cold. The napkins, still neatly folded, hadn't been touched. The framed picture of Marshall stared back at me from across the table. Same gentle eyes, same kind mouth. Every Father's Day, I used to handcraft something for Marshall. Not because he expected it. He hated fanfare. But I believed in gestures, quiet ones. One year, I stitched a memory quilt from old concert shirts and high school track jerseys. Another year, I made him a leather-bound journal, filled the first 10 pages with letters I wrote during the first years of our marriage. He read them out loud by the fire. He cried on the 7th letter. I pretended not to notice. Marshall didn't like cruises. He said motion sickness robbed him of the ocean's poetry. But he would have sat at this table, eaten every bite of the roast, and left me a single flower from the backyard in return. This year, he got a frame and silence, and I got a joke. The lottery ticket still lay next to my teacup. I hadn't moved it. I hadn't touched my tea. I heard Jake's voice earlier that afternoon, whispering to his father when I brought out the food. Do I really have to sit by Grandma? I wanted to sit with Grandpa Robert. He always has funny stories. And Brandon had replied without pause. Sit wherever Grandpa wants you. Be polite, okay? He's earned it. He's earned it. As if love and respect were currency to be bought at luxury price points. As if my years of reading bedtime stories, of bandaging scraped knees, of sitting through winter baseball games in a folding chair meant less than 2 cruise tickets with embossed boarding codes. I stared at the quilt draped over the back of the couch, the one I made for Marshall. The stitching frayed at the corners, but it still held, unlike my son. The doorbell rang just as I was rinsing the dishes. I opened the door to find Joyce, my neighbor, holding a pie. Thought you might want some company, she said, her eyes immediately scanning the empty living room behind me. Big lunch today, huh? I nodded. They just left. Joyce followed me into the kitchen like she had so many times before. She noticed the clean plates, the spotless glasses, the unserved slices of pie on the counter. She didn't ask about the cruise tickets. She didn't mention the laughter from earlier. She simply looked at the folded cloth napkins and said gently, "You still iron these?" "I do," I said. "Every holiday. Habit, I guess." Joyce set the pie down, removed her sweater, and took a deep breath. Then she asked, not unkindly, "Helen, do you ever wonder who you're keeping all this ready for?" I didn't answer. I just looked down at my hands. The knuckles were starting to swell from age, but I still had the strength to iron, to carve a roast, to lay out place cards that no one noticed. I used to think love was passed down like recipes. Now I wasn't so sure. Joyce reached for the kettle and poured us both a cup. She didn't press the question again. She didn't need to. The silence between us had already done the talking. Outside, the sun had begun to lower, casting soft shadows across the dining room. My house still smelled like rosemary and garlic, but the warmth was gone. It had left with their laughter. Joyce looked over her teacup and said, almost like a whisper, "You know, you don't owe anyone your dignity, not even family." I looked at the lottery ticket again. $2. And somehow, still more honest than everything that had happened today. Monday morning started like most others. I brewed my coffee, fed the birds, wiped down the kitchen counters even though they were already clean. Then I sat at the table with my laptop, like I did every first of the month, to go over my bank statements. It was routine. I'd been tracking every dollar since the day Marshall passed. Not because I was afraid. I'd always been careful. But because the habit gave my days shape. It reminded me I was still in control of something. The list of charges loaded slowly. Grocery store, utility bills, my donation to the shelter on Maple Street. All familiar, all accounted for. And then, there it was. Premium Cruise Lines, $13,487.20. My heart paused before it could beat again. I clicked the line, certain it was a mistake. But the confirmation code, the timestamp, everything matched. The transaction had gone through the Thursday before Father's Day, exactly 4 days ago. I wasn't near a travel agency that day. I hadn't made any calls. I hadn't even left the house. But Brandon had. He still had access to my account. I'd added him when Marshall died, just in case. At the time, I thought it made sense. I thought I could trust my own son. I closed the laptop slowly, pushed the coffee aside. It had gone cold. For a few seconds, I just sat there, hands folded in my lap like a student waiting for bad news. Then I picked up the phone. He answered after 3 rings, his voice casual, breezy. "Hey, Mom, everything okay?" I took a breath. "Brandon, I was looking at my account this morning. There's a charge for nearly $13,500 to Premium Cruise Lines." Silence. Then a sharp inhale, followed by a little laugh. "Oh, that. Yeah, I booked that for Robert. Father's Day surprise. You saw how happy he was." I didn't speak. I let the silence stretch until he felt the need to fill it. "Look, I figured I'd use the family account. I mean, it's not like you're going anywhere. You've always said you want to live simply, right?" I finally spoke, my voice even. "You didn't ask me." "Mom, come on. We're family. What's yours is mine. You've always said that." "No, Brandon. I said that when you were 6, not when you were 42. He sighed heavily, like I was being difficult. "It's just money. And Robert, he's been such a help to us, financially. With the house, Jake's school, Emily's car. He's been more of a father to me these past few years than—" He trailed off, but the silence after said more than he meant to. I closed my eyes. "Then your real father ever was?" I finished for him. "No, that's not what I meant. I just mean, he shows up. He provides. He understands." The phone was cold against my ear. My hand didn't shake. Not yet. "You took over $13,000 from my account without asking. Then you used it to buy a luxury cruise for your wife's father and gave me a $2 lottery ticket." "Don't be dramatic, Mom. It was meant to be fun. You could have won big. And anyway, you weren't going to use that money." I stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the garden Marshall and I had planted together. The roses were starting to bloom. "You're right," I said quietly. "I wasn't going to use it." "Exactly. So what's the problem?" "The problem," I said, "is that you didn't see me as worth asking. You didn't think I deserved respect, or a real gift, or even an explanation. He exhaled loudly. Mom, you're being sensitive again. Let's not make a big deal out of this. We'll pay you back when we can. You're not going to, I said simply. And you know that. Silence again. Look, he said finally, voice clipped. I'm busy. Can we talk about this another time? No, I said. I think I've heard everything I needed. So what? You're mad now? You're gonna hold a grudge? No, I replied. I'm going to remember. I let that sit a moment, then added softly, Thank you, Brandon, for showing me exactly where I stand in your life. Then I hung up. I didn't cry. Instead, I poured out the cold coffee, rinsed my cup, and wiped the counter one more time. I wasn't shaking. I was learning. I held the lottery ticket between my fingers for a long time after the call. It wasn't even worth tearing. It was already bent, creased, smudged at one corner from being handled without care. Still, part of me hesitated. Not because I believed it would win. No, not that. But because I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of knowing I treated it like a joke too. But then I remembered Brandon's voice. It's just money. Robert has been more of a father. You weren't going to use it anyway. And I let the ticket slip from my fingers into the kitchen trash bin. It made no sound when it landed, just floated down gently, like a feather pretending it wasn't heavy. I stood there for a moment, staring at the lid still open, the coffee grounds clinging to the inside like regret. Then I closed it, slowly, carefully. And I turned to the kettle. I filled it with cold water from the sink and set it on the stove. My movements were mechanical, rehearsed, almost sacred. The whistle came 5 minutes later. I poured it over my tea leaves in a porcelain cup that had survived 3 decades, 2 dishwashers, and 1 angry toddler with a plastic bat. The rim had a tiny chip on the left side, just enough to snag the lip if you weren't paying attention. Marshall once called it the good cup. Not because it was expensive, it wasn't, but because it had a shape that sat perfectly in the palm, like it had been made for hands that were tired but still steady. I never replaced it. I never replaced a lot of things after he died. I carried the cup to the table and sat in the same spot where I'd been humiliated less than 48 hours ago. The same seat where Brandon tossed me a $2 ticket like it was a leftover napkin. I lifted the tea slowly. Steam curled up like memory, soft, persistent. It fogged my glasses for a second, and I closed my eyes, just to feel the warmth. The rim touched my lip where the chip was, and I didn't flinch. I'd learned long ago how to tilt the cup just so, how to hold broken things in ways that didn't hurt anymore. I looked at the teacup the way some women look at themselves in old photographs, with both longing and distance. Q sut vien nhung van am van lam, tron kong viex. Like me. There had been a time when my presence filled this house. Birthday banners hung crooked in the hallway. Brandon's muddy cleats left by the door. Marshall's baritone voice humming from the garage. Now, even my shadows felt thinner. I took another sip. Outside, the roses we'd planted were beginning to lean against the window pane, heavy with bloom. They didn't need applause to grow. They just needed tending, like people, like mothers, like the kind of love that doesn't come with cruise tickets or velvet boxes or posts for social media. The tea was warm, the silence warmer. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to call, to show up, to say sorry. I just sat with myself, with my chipped cup, and let the quiet be enough. The lottery ticket was in the trash. But I was still here. And I was not done. The house was still when the numbers came on. It was nearly midnight. I hadn't meant to stay up so late, but the kettle had whistled again, and I poured one last cup. That chipped porcelain held warmth better than any of the others. The television was still murmuring in the background. A cooking show rerun had lulled me into a daze. But then the voice changed. Brighter, sharper. And now, tonight's winning numbers for the Super Lotto draw. I almost turned it off. Almost. Instead, I sipped my tea. 5, 12, 19, 34, 47. And the Powerball. On Yeti, I didn't react at first. Just sat, like the numbers were someone else's fortune being whispered into a dark room. But something in me stirred. A strange tremor of déjà vu. I blinked. The numbers repeated on screen. Large white digits against a blue background. Powerball, 17. Slowly, I turned my gaze toward the kitchen trash can. It was still where I'd left it. Closed. Undisturbed. I didn't move for a full minute. Then I rose, walked over in silence, and lifted the lid. There it was, curled slightly, wedged between an eggshell and a used tea bag. The lottery ticket. I picked it up carefully, like it was a piece of thin glass. The edges were damp, a little torn. A smudge of jam or grease darkened one corner. I didn't care. I held it under the kitchen light and matched each number one by one. Powerball, 17. I didn't breathe. The room didn't move. The silence was loud, so loud I could hear the refrigerator humming like a nervous child. I walked to the sink and gently ran the ticket under a trickle of warm water, then patted it dry with a clean cloth. I smoothed the paper out on the counter, hands shaking slightly now. The numbers hadn't changed. I had just won $120 million. I sat back down in my chair. The chipped teacup waited, still half full. I wrapped both hands around it to steady myself. And then, nothing. No screaming, no euphoria, just stillness. A strange kind of ache. Not pain, not joy. Something in between. Like my soul had stretched too quickly to hold something it wasn't sure it wanted. I looked at the ticket again, blinking, slowly. I had never dreamed of being rich. I had dreamed of being seen, respected, appreciated. I didn't need this money. I needed someone to say, "Thank you, Mom," to mean it, to look me in the eyes and see everything I gave up without ever being asked. I needed someone to sit across from me at this table and remember who held their feverish hands at night, who stitched Halloween costumes at 2 a.m, who stayed behind while the world moved on. But they hadn't done that. They'd handed me a joke and used my savings to gift another man a vacation I would never be invited on. I looked at the chipped teacup again. If I told them, they'd come running. Brandon, Emily, even Robert. There would be flowers. Apologies. Calls I hadn't received in years. But none of it would be for me. It would be for this, the paper that nearly rotted in the trash. And suddenly, the choice felt clear. Not cruel, not revenge. Just truth. I would not tell them. I would not share this money. Because they hadn't shared their gratitude. And I realized, in that moment, something simple and final. They hadn't failed to give me money. They had failed to give me meaning. And now, I had both. The next morning, I woke before dawn. The birds hadn't started yet. The light outside was still that soft, uncertain gray, neither night nor day. But I was sure of one thing. It was time. I placed the now-dried lottery ticket into a small Ziploc bag, the kind I used to pack Brandon's school sandwiches in. Then I tucked that into a padded envelope, already addressed and ready. I had printed out the claim form at 4 a.m., signed it with steady hands. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even tell Joyce, though her porch light was on across the hedge, and she was probably sipping her cinnamon coffee, same as every morning. Instead, I walked alone to the blue mailbox 2 blocks down, ignoring the one right outside my house. That one felt too close, too watched. When the envelope dropped in with a soft metallic echo, something in my chest loosened. I walked back, slower. Back home, I opened my laptop and logged into my bank. There were still fingerprints of Brandon everywhere. His name linked to my shared savings. His automatic alerts set to notify him of large balances or withdrawals. I remembered how touched he'd been when I added him, saying it made him feel trusted. Now I revoked every access, quietly, without drama, no messages, no warning. Just like how he made that cruise payment. I clicked Confirm Changes, and the screen blinked once before refreshing. Done. The balance stayed the same. The numbers hadn't changed, but something deeper had. I was no longer his emergency plan. I was my own. Later that afternoon, Joyce stopped by to return my garden shears. She didn't knock. She never did. Just tapped twice on the screen door and let herself into the kitchen like she had since 1983. She saw me at the table, holding my teacup with both hands. "Well, you look different," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "My hair's a mess." "Not that kind of different," she said gently. "Your eyes, they're quieter, stronger." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I sipped. The tea was still warm. "You keeping secrets from me, Whitmore?" I smiled. "Maybe." Joyce didn't press. She never did. That's what made her a good friend. She knew when silence had more to say than words. She looked down at the chipped teacup in my hands. "You know, you've had that cup longer than most marriages." "I trust it more than most husbands," I replied, and we both chuckled. But beneath the laugh, she could feel it. Something had shifted. She reached out, just brushed my wrist lightly. "Whatever it is, Helen, I'm proud of you." That was all. And when she left, I sat there a little longer. I didn't check my email. I didn't refresh the tracking number on the claim envelope. I didn't let myself think too far ahead. I just let the peace settle. Because for the first time in years, maybe decades, I wasn't waiting for someone else to save me. I had quietly saved myself. I didn't even know Emily had started live streaming until Joyce sent me the link. It was a Thursday, late morning. I had just trimmed the roses and was dusting off the windowsill when my phone buzzed 3 times in a row. Joyce rarely texted me at that hour. "You need to see this. Link. Emily's gone live. It's about you." I stared at the screen for a moment, not moving. Then I clicked. Her face filled the frame, well lit, as always, makeup done just enough to look raw, but relatable. Behind her, their bright white kitchen glowed like a commercial. Tears rolled down her cheeks, perfect little drops that didn't smudge her mascara. "I'm not doing this for attention," she sniffled, voice trembling. "I'm doing this because families should never betray each other. My mother-in-law, Helen, has taken something that wasn't hers." Pause. Dramatic breath. Look into camera. It was a gift Brandon and I gave her for fun, just a joke. She even laughed when she got it. But then, we found out it was a winning ticket. She choked back a sob. A well-rehearsed one. And now, she's cut us off, changed bank info, refuses to even speak to us, after everything we've done for her. She's keeping all of it, $120 million, from her own son. The comments rolled in instantly. "OMG, I'm so sorry. That's elder greed. No offense. I'd never do that to my kids. Family is everything. Wow. Stealing from your son? Disgusting. My mom did this too, kept everything when my dad died. Narcissistic old women are dangerous. My hand stayed still, holding the phone. I read each word like someone peeling a wound open slowly. There were thousands of views within the first hour, dozens of shares, screenshots, threads tagged with "Dahlgren cruel mother," "Dahlgren lottery thief," and worst of all, "Cancel Helen." The phone rang once. Brandon. Then again, unknown number. Then silence. Then more messages. My Facebook was flooded. How dare you do that to your own grandchildren? You look sweet, but clearly you're not. Emily is the kindest person ever, and she didn't deserve this. You raised a son who loves you, and this is how you repay him? Greedy old witch. I didn't reply. Didn't delete. Didn't post a counter video. I just sat at the kitchen table, the very one where I'd once cut out paper hearts with Brandon in 3rd grade, and watched the world spin its version of me. A villain, a thief, an ungrateful mother. And still, I said nothing. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew the truth was not something I needed to shout. I placed the phone down, turned it face down so I wouldn't see the blinking notifications. Outside, the mailman passed by. I could hear the rustle of envelopes, the soft slam of the metal flap. Life didn't pause just because the internet wanted blood. I reached for my teacup. Still warm. The chip on the rim caught the light for a second. I thought of that night when I pulled the ticket from the trash, the grease stain, the jam smear. If I had waited one more day, it would have been ruined. And now, they wanted it back. Not because they loved me. Not because they'd reflected. But because it was valuable. My silence wasn't weakness. It was memory. It was clarity. It was choice. Let them talk. Let them invent. I didn't owe them a narrative. I didn't owe them noise. I took another sip of tea, let the bitterness settle with the warmth. One truth remained. They had handed me trash, and I turned it into something priceless, without asking for anyone's approval. The phone rang late afternoon, an unfamiliar number with a Napa Valley area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. After days of being swarmed with strangers' opinions, silence had become my comfort. But something in my chest told me to answer. "Helen Whitmore?" A deep, weathered voice asked. "Yes, who's calling?" William Callahan, Robert's father. I hadn't spoken to William in over 10 years, not since Emily and Brandon's engagement party, where he'd given a beautiful toast about legacies and character. Back then, he was already retired from the federal bench, a man of quiet words and sharp eyes. "I've watched the video," he said plainly. My body tensed. And I've also watched them spin a lie so fast it could gut the truth if no one stepped in. He exhaled, slow and deliberate. The kind of breath only men who've seen courtrooms fall silent know how to take. "I was there, Helen. Father's Day. I saw what they did. I saw what you were given. I saw Brandon smirk when he handed you that ticket." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Robert laughed. He said, "Classic Helen, keeping face even after a slap in public." And then they opened champagne for him while you sat there with nothing but that slip of paper. I closed my eyes. You didn't ask for this to go viral. You didn't call reporters. You didn't make a scene. And yet, they've painted you as a thief. He paused. The line went still except for the hum of his old clock in the background. "I can't stay silent, Helen. My son and daughter-in-law crossed a line. I taught Robert better." I whispered, You don't have to. Yes, I do. Silence in the face of injustice is complicity. And I won't have my name tangled in this if it means watching a good woman get torn apart for having the audacity to remain quiet. That night, William posted a public statement on his personal page. His words were measured, precise, as though written for the congressional record. He titled it, "For the Sake of Truth and One Woman's Quiet Dignity." I, William E. Callahan, was present on the morning of June 16th, Father's Day, at my grandson's home. I witnessed Helen Whitmore receive a $2 lottery ticket, while my son, Robert Callahan, was presented a $13,000 cruise package purchased from Helen's own savings, without her consent. Helen expressed no anger. She smiled and sipped her tea, but I saw the fracture beneath that smile. This week, I have watched lies spread like rot. I cannot allow it. I hereby affirm that the lottery ticket was a dismissed gift, mocked even, and Helen owes no one anything. She has not stolen. She has not betrayed. She has endured. His post reached nearly 1.2 million views within 48 hours. Suddenly, the tide shifted. Influencers retracted their hot takes. Comments changed tone. Wait, she paid for the cruise? The dad confirmed everything. That poor woman. Can you imagine being publicly humiliated like that and still staying silent? Number respect. Helen is trending. As it should, I didn't reply. I didn't post a victory note. I did what I had always done. Boil the kettle, pour the tea. But this time, the tea tasted different. Not because of what the world now believed, but because someone finally stood up. Not for me, but with me. The envelope had arrived 3 days earlier. Heavy, official, embossed seal. Inside was the formal invitation: California State Lottery Ceremony, Grand Prize claimant Helen Whitmore, date, time, location, dress code, business formal. I stared at it for a long while, letting my fingertips trace the gold trim. Then I opened my old cedar wardrobe, the one Elliot built for me back when we still danced in the kitchen after dinner. Tucked in the back, behind 2 scarves and a forgotten umbrella, was a dress I hadn't worn in years. Lavender. Soft, but firm in presence. Like me. I ironed it that morning with deliberate care, pressed the pleats, steamed the neckline, pinned a small brooch Elliot once gave me on our 30th anniversary, not for luck, for memory. As I arrived at the venue, camera lights flashed like summer lightning. I walked alone. No entourage, no manager, no dramatic fanfare. Just me. And I stood tall. At the reception table, the staff greeted me with warmth. "Mrs. Whitmore, we're honored. The stage is yours in 15. Inside the grand ballroom, velvet chairs lined rows of polished marble. A podium stood center stage. The room buzzed with media. Cameramen whispered. Reporters prepped their questions. Then, a commotion near the entrance. I turned slowly. Brandon and Emily, striding in, not invited, but certain they belonged. Emily in heels, too high for the steps. Brandon in a suit I paid for when he couldn't afford one after grad school. They moved fast, straight toward me. "Mom," Brandon barked, "we need to talk before this whole thing gets official." "It's a family ticket," Emily added, breathless. "You laughed when we gave it. That makes it shared property." Security approached. "Ma'am, are these guests with you?" I looked at Brandon, at the boy I once rocked through chickenpox, who clung to my finger on his first day of kindergarten. Then I turned to security. "No," I said softly, "they're not." The guards guided them away, politely but firmly. Brandon protested. Emily shrieked something about betrayal. A camera caught it all. I stepped forward toward the stage. The ceremony began. The host announced the amount with grandeur. Congratulations to Mrs. Helen Whitmore, winner of $120 million. Applause, flashbulbs. I took the mic, steadied my breath. Then a reporter, young and eager, pushed forward. Mrs. Whitmore, do you plan to share the winnings with your family? A hush fell. The room waited, some expecting generosity, others scandal. I smiled, not wide, not bitter, just enough. I was told not long ago that I was more of a burden than a blessing, that my role was outdated, forgotten, a leftover. Pause. I held up my teacup brooch gently between two fingers. But I've learned something important. If I was ever a burden, today is the day I step out of that role. Another pause. Then, no. I will not be sharing it with those who discarded me, but I will share it with those who see people like me not as a bank account, but as a human being. Silence. Then a slow ripple of claps. Then more. And for the first time in years, I wasn't background noise. I wasn't invisible. I was a woman. Whole. Standing where no one thought I belonged, but where I knew I did. It didn't take long for the dust to settle. The headlines lingered for about a week, maybe two. But in today's world, even firestorms have a shelf life. The public moved on, but the consequences stayed. Brandon was placed on administrative leave from his firm. It wasn't the money. It was the footage. Him shouting at a lottery event, claiming ownership over something he once mocked. The HR department called it reputational liability. They called it brand risk. I called it truth surfacing. Emily's parenting blog, once filled with glowing posts about gratitude and family values, was flooded with comments. Is this the same woman who tried to steal from her mother-in-law? Unfollowed. Integrity matters. You raised your son to call that woman grandma? I'd be ashamed. Sponsorships dropped. Her podcast went silent. And their home, for sale within a month. I didn't gloat. I didn't watch it unfold with popcorn and smugness. I watered my garden. I hosted Joyce for afternoon tea. I read again. Real books, not just recipes or bills. And I waited for nothing. Until one Thursday morning, an envelope arrived. No return address, just my name. Handwritten in uneven cursive I knew better than my own. Jake. Inside, a folded piece of notebook paper. No email. No TikTok. Just ink on paper. Dear Grandma, I don't know if I'm allowed to write to you. Dad says you're angry, and Mom says you lied. But I don't think that's true. Sometimes I hear them argue, and I wish I was at your house instead. It was quiet there. You made soup that didn't come from a jar. I miss your garden. I miss the way you put honey in my tea even when Mom said not to. I miss your smell, like warm books and cookies. I miss you more than anyone. Love, Jake P.S. I saved a petal from the tulip we planted. It's in my drawer. I held the paper close, the ink smudged slightly where he'd pressed too hard on his O's. He always did that. I used to tease him, call them strong man circles. I didn't cry. Instead, I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer where I kept the good linen. The drawer for sacred things. Then I sat on the porch, warm cup in hand, and whispered into the breeze. You remembered, baby. That's all Grandma ever needed. That was the beginning of something new. Not a reconciliation, not a redemption arc, just a thread. Thin, honest, and gentle. A boy who saw through noise, and a woman who waited, not for apologies, but for the softest kind of truth, the kind that comes in a child's handwriting. It was nearly dusk when I heard the knock. Not the kind of knock that demands, the kind that hesitates, then tries again, softer. I opened the door, and there he was, Brandon, my son. The same boy I once walked through storms just to get to his school recital on time. Now a man, standing like a collapsed version of his former self. His eyes were sunken, his shirt wrinkled, his wedding band gone. "Mom," he began. I didn't speak. I simply stepped aside. "Come in." He hesitated, as though unsure whether the invitation was real. Inside, the house was calm. The same ceramic teapot whistled gently. The lavender curtains glowed from the sunset filtering through them. I walked to the kitchen, prepared 2 cups, sat across from him at the table. "Sugar?" I asked. He shook his head. We sat in silence for a moment, the tea between us warming our hands, but not the air. Then he spoke. "I need help." I nodded. "I lost my job. Emily moved out last week, took Jake to her mother's." I didn't flinch. "I know I messed up," he added, voice cracking. "I said things I shouldn't have. We both did. But I need to fix things." He looked up, desperate. "I need 1 million, Mom. Just to stabilize. Pay off the credit line, legal fees, a few months' rent." He leaned in. "I know you have it. And I'm your son." There it was. That phrase again, used like a password, like a key to a vault he never built, but expected to access. I placed my cup down gently, looked at him, really looked. This was the same man who once told a Facebook audience that I was greedy, who let his wife twist the truth while he stood beside her. And yet now, he sat at my table, asking, not with rage, but with the same silence I once used to survive his absence. I folded my hands. "Brandon," I said, calm as the tea steam rising between us, "do you remember the Father's Day cruise?" He looked away. "The one you booked for Robert using my account. The $13,487 that left without a word. That was different. It was. Because you didn't ask, and you didn't say thank you." I paused, letting the air stretch. "So let me ask you, why should I give you $1 million when you took 13,000 without asking?" He blinked. His lips parted, but no words came. I softened, not out of pity, but clarity. "This isn't about revenge, Brandon. It's about boundaries. I'm not punishing you." "Then help me," he said, voice barely above a whisper. I reached across and gently touched his wrist. "Son, I will always want you to stand, but I won't carry you while you continue to blame the weight on me." He looked down, shoulders folding in. "I'm not giving you money," I continued, "but I'll give you something far more painful. Space." I rose, taking the empty teacups with me. As I rinsed them at the sink, he remained seated, still, perhaps for the first time, truly still. He stood eventually, slowly. "Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Brandon." And that was it. No slammed doors, no shouted accusations. Just the truth, laid bare over tea. Not cruel, not cold, just final. As the door clicked shut behind him, I poured myself one last cup. The teacup, chipped, lavender-trimmed, held warm as always. Just like me. The screen door swung shut with a dull thud. He didn't slam it. Brandon never slammed doors. That would have taken too much emotion, too much ownership. Instead, he left like a draft. Cold, quiet, slipping through the cracks and leaving behind only silence. He was halfway down the porch steps when he turned. "You know." "What, Mom?" I didn't answer. I just stood still, one hand resting on the kitchen doorway, the other still warm from holding the teacup. "You're not even family anymore." It wasn't shouted, just spoken, firm, like a judgment, a final strike of the gavel in a courtroom he believed he presided over. My heart didn't jump, it didn't sink, it just paused, like a breath I'd been holding for years had finally been exhaled. I stepped forward, calm, no drama, no heat. "Brandon," I said, "let me tell you something about family." He stopped, just at the bottom step, his silhouette outlined in the amber wash of the porch light. The same light I'd once kept on late into the night, waiting for him to come home from teenage misadventures. The same bulb I used to replace with care, because my boy might trip if it's too dark. I let that moment hang between us. Then I said it. Family isn't just blood. It's not who shows up to take. It's who remembers to say thank you when they leave with full hands. He didn't reply, so I said the rest, the line that had been forming in my bones for years, carving itself into the soft parts of me every time I was dismissed, overlooked, or expected to just absorb the blow. Family is where people give and then remember to give back. It's not a place you return to when you're broke, ashamed, or cornered. It's a home built on gratitude, not entitlement. He stared at me, something flickering behind his eyes. Maybe shame, maybe anger, maybe just the faint realization that I meant it, that I wasn't bending this time. I wasn't waiting by the window. I wasn't baking his favorite bread. I wasn't pulling open my wallet like some mechanical reflex trained by guilt. No one was finally closing a chapter. Brandon turned, stepping into the darkness of the driveway. I watched his figure grow smaller, swallowed by the shadows. Then I shut the door, locked it, not from spite, from peace. I leaned against the frame, breathing slow and even. The tea had gone cold on the table, but my heart had never been warmer. Outside, the wind rustled the azaleas. Inside, I whispered to no one in particular. I may not be your family anymore, but at least now, I am mine. It used to be an old mechanic's shop, chipped red paint, oil stains on the concrete, the kind of place young men once huddled around engines and stories. Now, it was mine. I bought it quietly, in a town 2 counties over, where no one whispered about lottery winners and no child pointed out of a car window to say, "That's the woman from Facebook." The garage still smelled faintly of rubber and rust, but now mingled with lavender polish and fresh pine shelves. On the wall where a calendar of bikini models once hung, I had a local artist paint a mural. Women who raised the world. Foundation, in deep plum lettering, beneath silhouettes of women with aprons, briefcases, baby slings, and books, no fanfare, no press release, just a soft open. 3 refurbished desks lined the side, one filled with pamphlets about financial literacy for older women, one stacked with books on rebuilding after divorce or loss, and the last, my favorite, had a teacup on it. The chipped one. I'd cleaned it gently and placed a tiny succulent inside. A symbol, not decoration. A reminder. I wasn't broken. I was planted. The bell above the garage door chimed, and I turned just in time to see a familiar figure duck inside. "Well, well," Joyce grinned, holding a covered dish in her arms. "So this is where you ran off to." I smiled, really smiled. She walked around, eyes wide, pausing to run her fingers over the workbench. Then she read the sign out loud, softly. "Women who raised the world." She looked at me, her voice gentled. "You found yourself again, huh?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I took the dish from her hands, warm peach cobbler. and placed it on the small side table I'd turned into a tea station. Then I poured 2 cups. Same ritual, different season. As we sat, the sunlight filtered through the high windows, casting soft gold across the wooden floors. No words needed, just steam rising, peach scent filling the air, and the slow silence of a new beginning. But after a while, I looked at her and said, "I didn't just find myself." "Oh?" I remembered I'd been here all along. Just quiet, waiting for someone to tell me I mattered. Joyce nodded, eyes misty. She reached for my hand and squeezed. "And now you're telling others." "Exactly." A young woman walked in, maybe late 30s, nervous smile, asking about the flyer she saw at the library. Joyce stood and gave me a look. "I'll leave you to your work, founder." She winked. After she left, I sat with the young woman, explained our mission, a safe space for women rebuilding after being overlooked, erased, replaced. We'd hold workshops, support groups, quiet Sunday teas. No preaching, just presence. Before she left, she looked at the mural and whispered, "I didn't think anyone saw women like that." I smiled. We do now. That night, I closed the garage doors slowly, let the silence settle. I made one last cup of tea, placed it beside the succulent. Then I flipped sign to closed and whispered to myself, "Finally. Open." It hung just above eye level, beside the window where the morning sun slanted in soft and warm. A small, simple frame. No gold, no glitter. Just aged wood, worn at the corners, like the hands that had once held what sat behind the glass. The lottery ticket. Crinkled. Coffee-stained. The numbers faded slightly from where my thumb had pressed too long in disbelief. A tear had smudged the corner ink, not from sorrow, but from that moment when shock and clarity collided inside me. Next to it sat the teacup. Yes, that teacup. Still chipped. Still imperfect. But now, no longer forgotten in the back of a cupboard. It rested in a clear box, open at the top. Inside, a sprig of dried lavender. A gift from Jake, tucked into his handwritten letter. Below them both, on the bottom edge of the display, was a single engraved line. "You didn't break me. You reminded me who I am." People often came into the foundation and paused there. They rarely asked. But when they did, I never offered the whole story. Instead, I'd say, "That's not a ticket. That's a moment. A reminder that even when people try to write you off, the page is still yours to turn." Some nodded politely, unsure. Others lingered longer, staring not at the ticket, but at the teacup. It surprised me how many connected with that small, ordinary object. "My grandma had one just like it," someone once said. "Mine broke when I moved out," another whispered. But one woman, maybe in her 60s, stood for a long time, long enough for her tea to go cold. Then she turned to me and asked, "Did they ever say sorry?" I smiled gently. "Number. And they don't have to. Why not?" I looked up at the ticket, then back at her. Because forgiveness isn't about giving them peace. It's about giving yourself freedom. She exhaled, like something she'd carried for too long had just loosened. After she left, I sat behind my desk, the same one I'd built from old garage shelves. I opened Jake's letter again, not because I hadn't memorized it, but because some words deserved to be touched as well as remembered. In the quiet of that afternoon, the hum of life outside faded behind the thick windows. The scent of peach cobbler still lingered from yesterday's visit with Joyce. The tea was warm. And I was whole. Not because of money, not because of justice finally leaning in my favor. but because I had learned the most powerful truth of all. They didn't need to love me again. They didn't need to regret what they'd done, because I finally loved myself enough to walk forward without their permission. I closed Jake's letter gently and tucked it into the drawer beneath the framed ticket. Outside, someone opened the foundation door. "Hello?" a voice called. "Is this where strong women gather?" I smiled. "Yes," I said. "You're right on time. My name is Helen Whitmore. I'm 68 years old. And for most of my life, I thought being a mother meant giving until I disappeared. Until one day, a $2 lottery ticket, meant as a joke, helped me remember who I was. If you're listening to this, if you've ever been made to feel like your only worth was your bank account, your casserole, your silence, if your own children looked at you like a wallet that never runs dry, or a housekeeper who doesn't age, then let me tell you something I wish someone had told me sooner. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to stop pouring yourself into people who only offer empty cups in return. You are allowed to say, no. This time, I'm keeping what's mine, my peace, my voice, my dignity. I'm not angry anymore, not at Brandon, not even at Emily, because anger only anchors us to people who've already let go. And I've let go too, of needing to be needed, of measuring love in dollars, of confusing sacrifice with self-erasure. What I've kept is far more valuable. A teacup, a framed ticket, a letter from my grandson, Jake, a garage turned sanctuary, and my name, said with pride. Voiceover pause. Nhach nen nhe nhang bat jiao. If you've ever been cast aside, overlooked, erased in your own family's story, know this: there is still a story left to write, and the pen is in your hand now. So, I'll leave you with a question. If it were you, would you have shared the winnings, or would you have chosen to protect your worth? Drop your answer in the comments. Let this space, this channel, be where our stories meet, where they don't get deleted, don't get drowned out. Let's build a community where no mother, no woman, no elder ever feels disposable again. You've listened to mine. Now I'd love to hear yours.